I just wanted to be sure that. Amp, are you all set?
Are you using your microphone, Francesca? Oh, I can. Maybe I'm just deaf.
Nah, she's speaking very quiet.
Okay. We're there. Okay. So Commissioner Thomas, President, Commissioner Witowski, Vice Chair Kimsey, Chair Sovereign,
Present?
and Commissioners O'Neill and Champion are absent. For information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is on this meeting's agenda, which is online at isearchmonterey.org. If you are connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. We ask attendees to keep phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. Thank you for participating in your city government.
I believe we have a presentation at this time. You want to see this one?
Are we ready? Can you hear me?
I don't know why mine isn't going on. Thank you.
I'm very short.
Mm,
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. First of all, thank you very much. It's good to see you all. I'm glad we have quorum today. My name is Lori Iwami. Thank you, Brian and Francesca, for allowing me to present. I'm the Director of Marketing at the Monterey Museum of Art. Corey Madden, our Executive Director, sent her regrets and her regards. She is en route to Ireland for a family wedding, so she was not able to join us here today. A little bit about me. I have been with the museum since October. I moved to Monterey in 2020 and started volunteering actually with Brian and Francesca. I still volunteer at Palm. I started volunteering with the museum as a docent, and the opportunity came up for me to be the Director of Marketing here. So delighted to meet you all and to give you an update on what we're doing at the museum.
You love technology.
So you all are very familiar with the museum. It is across the street. Our primary location is on Pacific Street, and you're all aligned with the mission of we're really celebrating the diversity of California art, both past, present, and future. Looking at all of these pieces, you really also know that the historical strength of our collection has been with pre-1945 California art, and specifically with the art that was created right here in Monterey. Our new acquisitions and our new exhibitions also reflect our desire to represent the voices of California art present and our future voices. So some facts about our most recent fiscal year. We took in about 24,000 visitors last year, and that actually represents higher than our pre-pandemic levels. So we've really built our audience back. In addition to that, we also run a pretty big outreach so that we are outreaching those that we go out in the community. About 2,600 Monterey County residents are reached outside through our programs. And the students that we bring in now to the museum, a lot of them, it is their first touch with the museum. 57% of our school tours come from Salinas, South County, and North County. And with every one of those students, we send them home with free passes back to the museum. So it's an opportunity for them to bring their family back for free to visit Monterey and to go to the museum. As you know, our primary location is still on Pacific Street, will be on Pacific Street for the next 50 years, and we can talk about what our plans are there. We do have our La Mirada facility. It's not going away, but we envision that really as someplace where we can have special events there, museum special events. It's also available as an event rental venue currently. If anyone has questions, please feel free to chime in at any time during this presentation. So now let's talk about what we're looking at. Reimagining the museum. We had announced back in August that we have started to work with Jensen Architects of San Francisco to reimagine that Pacific Street location. And right now we are in pre-design phase. For those of you who have been in Monterey for a long time, some of the questions may be, why Pacific Street? Why not X, Y, or Z space? So we took all of that feedback into account. We really looked at a Lord Cultural Resources report that probably some of you get into. That report looked at a variety of locations, La Mirada, downtown Monterey, third-party location, and really what it came down to is that with the purchase of the Miller Adobe, with the Community Foundation's help, we're really looking at establishing Pacific Street as this sort of cultural campus where you can start to see there's Colton Hall here, the museum is on Pacific Street, the library is down the street, Casa Gutierrez is next door, the Miller Adobe and the Francis Elkins Park really starts to look like a heartbeat of an arts and cultural district. So that's the direction that we're heading in. Again, we're in that pre-design phase, so we are looking for community stakeholder feedback. And with that, we will be holding stakeholder meetings and getting feedback on what people imagine that new experience at the Pacific Street location will be. One of the first things we did is that we took a poll with Jensen. We took a focus group really with our internal team, museum staff, some of the board members, some local artists. I think David Laguerre was there, Susan Manchester was there. You may know who they are. And we said, what do you think that what does the 50-year experience for the museum look like? By and large, the biggest you can see in that word cloud, it is welcoming to everybody. It is about California art. It is of Monterey. It really elevates the historic district. We have an amazing historic district that we can collaborate together with. So those were all of sort of the big, I would say, thoughts that we had around how we look at the museum for the next 50 years. And what that means when it's welcoming is that it's community focused to Monterey. Our guiding principles, you can see them there. We are building for the future on Pacific Street. We want definitely to integrate with the city's larger plans and issues, walkability, resiliency, climate sustainability, and again, looking forward to those next 50 years and beyond. We want to be able to activate the historic district, make it lively. What does it mean to be a vibrant cultural arts and history district? And again, within the next 12 months or so, we will start having both small group focus groups with community stakeholders like yourselves, and then larger public meetings that we will organize in collaboration with the city and some various stakeholders across the county. So you might be asking, what does this collaboration look like? What does it mean to be a vibrant cultural arts and historical district? And for this, I have to thank my friend Brian, our friends at YAC, our friends at Casa Gutierrez, our friends at State Parks. So on Saturday, we're starting out with this experiment, really, of collaboration with a teen program. It's called Zines and Scenes. It's sort of a Halloween-themed activity. 4 different locations around the corner in that historic district, different activities, all free. We're all promoting this collaboratively to bring people to this sort of downtown heart of a cultural district. And it is aimed at teenagers. So again, we're looking at folks who it might be their first touch with a museum or a cultural institution. And how do we bring those people in here, make sure they have a good time, make sure they start to be connected to this place and to all of us. So that is what we are doing in terms of really trying to create that vibrant cultural district across all these different organizations. That's everything about the update. My last piece, because I'm in marketing, is to tell you about what our current exhibitions are now. And again, the theme here, creative partnerships in Monterey. So we are definitely looking at how the landscape, how artists such as Henrietta Shore and Edward Weston, how Francis and Eugenia McComas collaborated in Monterey with the landscape, with each other. Yugen, for example, is a modern collaboration. 2 divers, Chuck Davis and Ryuji, both well-known photographers. They free dive off of Monterey almost every day. They call each other on the phone and they say, hey, what's going on with the water? They free dive and they take photographs, one breath, holding their breath for between 60 and 90 seconds. One is a spotter, one is a photographer, and they have these amazing images of Monterey Bay that they have, again, creatively worked together in this environment with this landscape to create something just amazing. And the other 2 are, again, Belle Yang is a Carmel-based artist. She and her father actually painted together in this garage, literally in their garage. And this is another example of we're looking at creative partnerships in Monterey County of Monterey, looking at her history, looking at California. Belle has described herself as, for example, being 100% American and 100% Chinese. And I think we can all identify with being 100% American and 100% X, Y, or Z. So these are all of the things that we're building with the city, with our stakeholders, with the local area to really look at how we celebrate the diversity of California art, past, present, future, here in Monterey, staying in Monterey and looking at reimagining our Pacific Street location. That's everything from us. Does anyone have questions?
Could you speak to what are your initial thoughts on the scope of the building? I thought at one time Museum of Art was considering demolishing it, but the city said it's historic. Are you looking at a 2-story building with a rooftop plaza, or if you could speak a little bit to that? And second, are there any initial uses proposed for the Miller Adobe and the gardens there?
Okay, so I can speak to the second question first, and then we can talk about the first question. So the second question about the Miller Adobe, which is also a historic building, is right now we're looking at using that particular site for administration. So I would sit there, Corey, the executive director would sit there, advancement, possibly collections and education. It's not quite really defined that way. And your second question on the historic nature of the Pacific Street building, the answer there is we're still in pre-design phase. We have no drawings yet. We're really trying to figure out what the community wants from us from that building. If you're asking whether we are going to tear the whole thing down, I would say the answer is no. We want to make sure that we balance out sort of the cultural heritage of the building with what the building needs to be for the next 50 years. So we are in pre-design phase, so it's a little bit early to talk about, the building will have an entry here, or it'll be this many stories, or it will have a rooftop garden. Those are things that have been, I think, talked about, but I don't think we're at a place where we can talk about whether they're feasible or not.
Any other questions for Laura?
I have another question.
Of course.
I used to work for the city and about, I don't know, 35 years ago,
Yes.
the Museum of Art put in the sculpture garden on the city park. The intent was that those sculptures would be a changing type of sculptures, either to be relocated or to be sold. They haven't been relocated. They haven't been sold. There hasn't been a sculpture there in 35 years. The other intent was, I'm not sure if you're aware, I think I passed that on to Corey. A long-range plan of the city was to close off the street on the back of Casa Cateras,
Mhm.
very similar to Griffin Plaza down by East Village, and possibly to extend the sculpture garden not only in Elkins Park, but around there, so that people coming up the street would say, wait, oh, there's some art. So just to keep that in mind, and I hope Jensen Architects are looking at the sculpture garden, are looking at that plan to close the street, and are looking at Miller Adobe and the garden to see what could be done and all that.
Yes, thank you. I thank you. I didn't know that about the sculpture garden. So that's something that I will take back with me. I appreciate
Well,
that.
I can speak a little bit on that, which is that that's a shared sculpture. Some of them have been gifted back to it. So it was actually some of the items like parenthesis, I believe was, which is the red one
Yep.
in the back, which is closest there to Calle Principal, which you'll see in a lot of the kind of the marketing photos from Monterey Museum of Art. That was actually a purchase. It was a loan, but it was a purchase. And it was also some of those pieces were actually, it was part city. I did some research on that too, based when I joined here, because basically what had happened was that all the signs had worn out. And Monterey Museum of Art contacted me and said, "Hey, we need to get new signs." And I thought, why are you contacting me? Like, why are you guys contacting me about getting new signs? But that was part of it. It was supposed to be a rotating sculpture garden, but nothing had ever changed out of there. And you'll see that some of those have been long-term loans or donated or purchased over time. So I think it was supposed to be a shared project. So at some point, I think that's going to need to be a discussion between this commission and Monterey Museum of Art. As we move forward, as Lori's talking about this, about kind of what's the vision for Elkins Park? What's the vision for that? Because Elkins is maintained by the City of Monterey Parks Department. And for folks that may not be aware, Frances Elkins lived in the Adobe right behind over there, and she was a famous interior designer. And so Frances Elkins, that's where the park is named after her. She's has a big history in this area as well. So the Adobe why am I drawing a blank right now? But the one where the Pacheco Club, I believe,
The men's club.
the men's club,
Yeah.
where that's
I guess my point though, Brian, is that just as the Museum of Art has changing exhibits inside, it'd be nice to have changing sculptures outside.
right.
Just to maintain interest and have people come back in that area. It's a beautiful little park with only one bench, I think, in the entire park. But so I hope Jensen is looking at that.
I think that's definitely feedback that, if you are in a focus group, can take back with Jensen, because when we were talking with Jensen, there were some very broad themes around how do you make a park welcoming? You have more benches, you have it be visible from the street, you have it so that you can walk across the street without being afraid that you might be hit by a car. So those are the walkability issues that we are all thinking about. For example, when we have the block party, we actually close off Calle Principal, and that gives us, a safe space for walking. So those are all things that Jensen will work on, certainly with the city and with the museum. I think it's a great point.
And Bill, can I also add on there for folks that may not have seen, they're starting work in the coming weeks and some initial work on some ADA ramps around there on Calle Principal, Polk, Madison, in that area right now. So that work, and that's based on, I think, that 2013 plan that was through the planning department, but that just went through council last month to do the approvals to do that work there in Calle Principal.
And my last comment was that actually Ansel Adams had a small studio in Cannery Row. And we actually talked to him, the city talked to him about going in one of the buildings Right now, I think that's used by the city attorney's office. This was many years ago. Instead, he wound up going to a second story in San Francisco below Market Street, and hardly anybody can find it. So, I mean, there's Ansel Adams and the West Ends and all that. It would be great if we had a center of photography, whether it's in the Miller Adobe or Casa Cateras, but something dedicated to photography, just like in San Francisco, MoMA has a whole section on photography. So I would hope, that might be one of the objectives too.
Okay. Again, because it's early days and we haven't sort of scoped either the interior or the exterior of the building, all of that feedback is something that we definitely want to hear from you, Bill. So it gives us a sense for what the community wants. And that's something that Jensen needs to hear. It's something that we take really seriously in terms of how we put together a space for the next 50 years. Because you're right. I mean, the CPA down in Carmel has the Center for Photographic Arts. We have this really rich photography history here that we should celebrate. It's part of our Monterey, California legacy. So we should celebrate that. Thank you.
Laura, thank you for making this presentation. I think it raised a lot of interesting ideas around the group. And one of the things I'd like to do today is appoint some subcommittees, and think so all of you on the commission might be thinking of whether you'd like to serve as part of a group that was providing liaison with the
That would be great. Like I said, we are definitely in that pre-design phase, and we want to hear from community stakeholders about what you think the museum experience should be for the next 50 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
We'll just ask if there is anyone online that would like to make a comment on this presentation to raise your Zoom hand, or if there's anyone in the council chamber. Okay, thank you. There is not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe we have a second presentation by Brian.
Yeah. So thank you. And thank you, Lori, for coming out. Appreciate you. So just as an update on different activities, things here. So along with the Lower Presidio Historic Park, the Cultural Resources Program Manager from the U.S. Army Garrison has resigned from their position. And that is typically the person we would work with for a lot of different activities there. So we have a couple new contacts over there, how we work with for the museums right now. So I just want to make that noted. We sent in, there was a presentation on October 1st to City Council regarding the Lower Presidio Historic Park lease. For folks that attended that meeting, the direction for I'd recommend all the commissioners watch it. I know several were in attendance, either virtually or in person. But we're looking for guidance into kind of next steps. And because it's not fully agendized, we'll come back at another meeting to bring back a fuller discussion about that. But this topic was about continuing the lease and options for the lease there at the Lower Presidio Historic Park. So we'll be coming back to the Museums Commissions with the next steps. And the guidance from council was to work with the Museums Commission on the next steps. So we will agendize that at a future meeting and come up with a talking point, sort of fuller discussion about the Lower Presidio Historic Park. But at this point, I'll just make is that the council wanted to continue the lease, continue access to the park. And that was really highlighted by all the members there.
Ryan, could you speak briefly? I think it was your idea that one of the possibilities of the park is that it become a national monument or a national, I think you said historic resource. Could
Yeah,
you
so
speak a little bit to that.
Sure. So I think it's really that if you look at sites like, I'd say like Point Cabrillo in San Diego, which is a historic site next to a naval base, and it's still naval presence, still naval history, but it's a heritage site. there's national parks, there's national heritage sites, there's different sites, but they're run by the National Park Service, often in partnership with nonprofit partners that help out kind of doing activities, help support, whether that's nonprofit sales or different things on there. But the National Park Service could be a potential for taking over the lease, because the part with the National Park Service and having it as a national recognized is that we currently have a lease that goes through next 25 years. And I think 25 years is going to be really up in a blink of an eye. It's just going to go really fast. And at that point, what happens even with that point with the next level of the lease? So the thought with National Park Service is that it's a federal government working directly with federal government. And if any point in time when the Army decides to go through a BRAC process, which is base relocation and closure, if they went through a BRAC process, it automatically goes back to the National Park Service in perpetuity. So there's a lot more protection in my mind for long-term goal of saving that park for the community would be to have National Park Service and so that's engaging. There's a longer, we'll discuss that another time, because you have to do reconnaissance study, work with congressmen, those kind of points right there to get it. Secretary of Interior goes to Congress for appointing. So there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of discussion. There'll have to be some public discussions before you.
So what kind of interaction would there be with the city once it became a National Historic?
We would have to do
area,
some
or-
research on that, because we would work on, it's on city property. So the same way we work with the Army or Navy on different things, they have things like they work with NEPA, we work with CEQA for doing projects on there. There's different guidelines for different projects that they do. They'll notify you, but they're notifying at a different level. So I think that would be more on the discussion part of getting National Park Service involved in there. So I think that was just one of my ideas, because I'm thinking about what happens in 25 years, either way. Either that's right now that current lease is, we're halfway through that lease right now. And at 25 years, that 25 years is we need to have a solution that our children and our children's children and our children's children's children have access to that park. So that's where I would like to see how we can continue adding that. Moving on, and like I said, we'll bring it back to the commission for a larger discussion and more insight and work with everybody on it. Emil Norman panels have been delivered over to the Stanton Center. They're currently upstairs, and we're working with consultant firm ARG that's actually worked directly with Emil Norman on the restoration of the panels over at the Masonic Center in San Francisco on restoration. So he worked directly with Emil Norman before he passed on those ones on restoration. So minimal work needs to be done to restore them, just cleaning. But we'll look on some custom lighting and having those installed in Stanton Center. We had the show Ghost Adventures visit Monterey over a 3-day period for our museums. They're filming about Bercio Vasquez, the Matt Tarpey, Anastasio Garcia, some of the different folks. So that may show in November or December, that film, we will see. I'll let you guys know when that comes out. Our Monterey Angels, couple of things. One is that I'm having 12 high quality reproductions made. These are going to be made to be hung on Lighthouse and Del Monte Avenue. The reason being is that during the last couple of storms, you see these weather patterns we get more extreme weather patterns every year. And the wood panels have been continuing to be damaged. So there's less and less that we can hang up every year. So I took photos, working with a sign shop to put a vinyl of that photo on an aluminum panel so that we can set those up all on the street. And those will go up on those streets where they're more susceptible to damage higher up. And those should be ready in about a month. In November, I should be receiving the first 12 of those. And with that, also, I'll pass these around to commissioners. If you guys want to just take a look and pass them out. We'll have these next, probably later this month or next month. I've had 2 custom angel ornaments made for the holidays to start selling. And we're just waiting for some tags on those, but those should be coming out pretty soon. We'll have those for sale over at the Colton Hall and the library, and the funds for that will just go back towards the museums. We had the exhibit on Pat Hathaway collection, and Susan Klusmeyer, who retired from museums but works as our museum attendant as well, worked on the project with the Monterey County Historical Society. The Community Foundation for Monterey County funded the work to highlight different photos related to Monterey from the Pat Hathaway collection. So she worked on putting out the panels that went through September 29th in Colton Hall. And fiscal year 25 budget, we have an increase. We had an increase of $15,000 towards on-call staffing for cultural arts assistant. This would be supporting cultural arts and special events. So we received a decrease in operating budget line items of supplies and other things that offset that on-call staffing. So we may need to go back to mid-year budget to request more funding for some of those. But we've scheduled upcoming interviews for that cultural arts assistant. That person will also be helping in updating some items inside Colton Hall with our museums team, because we need to update some of the, whether interactive panel, new seating, and some of these displays inside of Colton Hall, as we've talked about before with that Community Foundation grant. The Neighborhood Community Improvement Program, there was one project that's a museums project that was, I believe was defunded during the pandemic, and it came back, which was the NM for New Monterey 18, which is Cannery Row Workers Houses Restoration. And that was approved by the NCIP committee. And I believe that these are going to council next month. So if anybody from the commission feels like they want to speak on that, to if there's any questions that come up during that council meeting regarding NCIP, if you want to talk about the importance of those, or if anybody wants a tour of the worker houses, worker shacks, let me know, and we could walk you through the inside of them as well, if you want to take a look. The ARG, they're finalizing the Pacific Biological Laboratories ADA report, and they're reporting back in the next 2 weeks. They are working off of the work that they had done before. So they're working on the designs, like the, so we have a phone call scheduled with them coming up. So I don't have any more kind of updates on that because I'm waiting to hear back from ARG. And
The
then
elevator is a part of that.
the elevator, yeah. So there'd be a lift. So the thought on that is that, can we have the lift in the back of the building rather than in the front of the building, or take out the garage? Because the part of it is like, I'm like 6'1", and my head will hit the door on the garage, so the garage is pretty low. So they would actually have to, if they did the opening through the garage or the front of the building, they have to raise up the living room area. And what that does is it knocks out about half of the living room, which was actually Ed Ricketts' bedroom and living room, where him and Steinbeck would hang out. So it's like, that's one of the major interpretive spaces to me, is that front living room area there. So to knock that out so that you can build a walkway, to me, doesn't make sense in an interpretive sense of that building and historic sense of that.
What about the conversations with the hotel and having a gate?
That's part of just bringing forward. So the thought is to bring forward the plan from them, then come back to having more conversations with the hotel, and then bring forward something to the Coastal Commission with a plan of like, this is what we would like to do, and bring it back to them for any updates or any questions that we would need there. But really, it's the easement, where there's a coastal easement that the hotel has along the back of the side of the building. And we have that large fence that's wearing down. If you go inside, you'll see a lot of the wood piers on the side are really rotting out along the side too, on the side of that. So I think a lot of that has to be replaced anyways, all along that big chain link fence. Is about 15-foot chain link fence.
I met with the hotel manager and also the owner of the property, Cannery Row Company. They were both very receptive. They said they're not going to give it 100% okay until they hear from the Coastal Commission. And Brian suggested we hold off on that until we get the design.
Okay.
And I think then we come back and look at how we do it. But to me, it's, what I'm thinking is, you've got a very wide walkway, and that allows you to have a lift that can go potentially up and down with minimal impact on the historic structure, because you want to impact the structure as little as possible. And the other part, because of things like the restroom, for folks that have been there, is if you were to make that the sole restroom, you have to make that restroom ADA compliant, which means punching it out another about 6 feet out, because it has to be like a 5 foot by 7 foot or something like that. And it's not. It's an older single family bathroom. So it's not that size. So you have to actually push the wall out another several feet, but you can make it a historic bathroom with an ADA bathroom if you hide that in there. So that's where I was just asking about those kind of aspects to it. And we had our Francesca and Brianna attended the CSUMB Service Learner Fair. So we've been starting to get requests for service learners from CSUMB, and also doing outreach at the Steinbeck Fair in Salinas so we can highlight the Ricketts Lab. And lastly, our Constitution Convention, it's 175th anniversary, and it's actually going to be taking place on the day of the signing. October 13th is the actual date of the signing. So we're having 2 showings of the reenactment. So on our museum's page, it is live for you to request a seat, because we are limited in number of seats like usual inside of the building. But please reserve a spot so that you can highlight, and if somebody's there to welcome anybody. If you're there, let us know if you're going to be there. It'd be great to have somebody to welcome in the audience as well. With that, any questions on my report?
On the last item,
Yeah.
we have paid those guys twice as much as usual for the second show, or what are we doing?
No, I think
Small. It's not twice as much.
that
It's a nominal additional.
it's a small fee additional, but we thought it would be good to have 2 showings.
Yeah.
Last year, what I had asked them to do, because they do a dress rehearsal, a walkthrough, as I asked them last year, because we got to a cap, right? We got to a cap of a number of people. So I said, if we have a cap, and I created a wait list, can we invite anybody from the wait list to attend your dress rehearsal? And that worked out pretty good, I think. So we just added for 2 shows, just because we had an increase. We had more than like 50 or 60 people that are going to want to watch it. So let's do a second show. And I think the crew is also excited, because they put a lot of work into it, and just to do a lot of work and then only do it once. So if we can do all the work and do it twice on the same day, I think it's beneficial.
Some of my friends and I attended the special exhibit, and we thought it was great at Colton Hall. I'd like to make a pitch, and I know you're way understaffed, but the idea of having a special exhibit once or twice a year, or maybe just once a year through grants, I think, that would induce locals. I mean, most locals do not come back to visit Colton Hall unless they have relatives or visitors coming there. So anyway, I would strongly encourage, if at all possible, to have a special exhibit. And I have a great suggestion for the next one: the history of capitals in California, from Monterey to Sacramento, where you just show San Jose, Benicia. You can do photographs of it and give a little history. I mean, how the heck did it ever get to Benicia? And anyway, just a suggestion. And Susan did a great job with it, and everybody that I knew that went there really loved it.
Thanks for the feedback. And I will say part of that was that was the nature of the grant that I filed for Community Foundation for Monterey County with Colton Hall, was really about that. A lot of locals come back for concerts, or they come back for the convention, or if they're taking somebody from out of town, they might take them to Colton Hall. But typically, the exhibits had not changed in 30 plus years. And I mentioned that the jail text had not changed since 1983. Like all the signs had not changed since that time. And so, and Susan mentioned to me when she came back, she goes, I put up the school exhibit. She says, this hasn't changed since I left, right? And so that was part of, I think, talking with Community Foundation, which is like, how do you rotate some of that? And so what I've said to the team is that we would do like a digital display that might rotate, because the state has information on all the different state capitals, from San Jose to Benicia to San Francisco, Vallejo. all of the different places. So you can take that information and put that on a screen. But there are a couple places like there's a organization in California called Exhibit Envoy that works with museums for rotating exhibits, and they have like an exhibit on the California grizzly bear and the history of Mexicans and Mexico in California. So some of that, and I've been in touch with them as well, because then there's a lot less curating that needs to be done by like a museum's curator. You essentially buy a package, and then you can add additional items based on your own things in there. And so I think like the grizzly bear specifically, because we have the Charles Knoll drawing, which is the drawing of grizzly bear used by the state flag. I think those kind of things, and there's more grizzly bear items here in this area, I think would be great. So we will be working on more exhibits, but it is being short-staffed is kind of the
Yeah.
killer. So that's where having the cultural arts assistant would be helpful.
I think we can move to the consent agenda adoption.
To check for any public comment or anything
It's
after. Oh, okay.
on this agenda.
Unless there are objections to consent agenda.
No, and if there's no comments on the director's presentation, which I do not see any hands raised at this time, or members of the public that have any questions or comments. Okay,
I recommend approval of the minutes.
I'll second them.
Roll call.
and then you don't have to do roll call.
Hearing no objection, we'll adopt the consent agenda.
There's no objection.
Let's move to the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting.
No, we just did that, right?
I think we just did that.
So we're
That-
into the
General public comments.
So
The approval of the minutes is in the consent
Yeah.
agenda. Thank you. Okay, general public comments.
So for anyone who would like to address the Museums and Cultural Arts Commission on an item within their jurisdiction that is not on today's agenda, we invite you to raise your Zoom hand, or if you are in the council chamber, to proceed to the podium. And again, this is for any item that is not on the agenda. So if there are no public, okay, then you're welcome if you would like to come up to the podium. And speakers have 3 minutes. I'll wait for you to see.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rudy Rosales. I'm a veteran of the nation of Monterey County, and I've been sitting here listening to you people, and not one person has brought up indigenous people. I mean, why don't we have something at the museum or have like Colton Hall, invite somebody like me to give a speech on Native American Indians from Monterey, California. I mean, I just think would be an interesting thing for everybody to find out. We lived on Dutcher Street right here by the police station, and Dutcher Street goes way back. And we had a meeting with the council, Monterey City Council, a while back. And I had 3 women, Mrs. Rodriguez, Mrs. Torres, and Mrs. Baum. They were in their 90s, 92, 93. And they all lived on Dutcher Street. And they came here for that one special meeting about how the city of Monterey should put up a plaque in front of the police station or somewhere there saying that this here, because even the Italians, all the Italians in Monterey knew it was the village site for the Native American Indians of Monterey. I mean, when you ask an Italian where the Indians were, they'd say Dutcher Street. But anyway, we'd like to see a plaque up there just saying that, you know, this here was a indigenous neighborhood. I think it'd be great. I mean, people say that we sold our houses to the city. We didn't. We were forced out. They see either sell or our houses would be condemned. I was 9 years old, but I remember that. My dad said we had to go. So anyway, I'm not here to complain about it. I'm just here to say that, something should be done. I mean, everybody promises everything, but something should be done to get the idea out there that we're still around. You guys talk about a plaque or something put out in front of the museum. How about a picture of the Esalen woman? This here's a picture goes back 100 years. I mean, if somebody could do something, maybe do an art sketch on the side of the building or something about this woman. I think it'd be a great idea to recognize the Native American Indians. I don't know what else to tell you guys, except that, I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of being Native American Indian. Through blood, through DNA samples, I go back, my family goes back 3,500 years here on the Monte Peninsula. We found human remains in Big Sur. They did the DNA test. They went back 3,500 years. They took my blood. It was the match. So, ever since I've done that, I've said to myself, something's got to be done. I mean, I'm 78 years old. Am I done?
That's the 3 minutes.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Well,
Thank you.
he's our only speaker. I don't care to let Rudy finish
There-
if he has a couple more minutes.
There is one online.
I'm sorry.
There is an additional public comment as well.
Well, that's okay, Bill.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Rudy, do you want to leave your contact information with me too? I don't know if I got the card. I got Philip's information, I think.
I'd like to note that he's correct that there were 3 people from the tribe who came to the last scheduled meeting, which we were unable to conduct for lack of
Quorum.
quorum of the commission. And personally, I was very impressed with that, and we got a few words, at least from the group that came, and today from you. And one of the things I want to do is, said earlier, is appoint some subcommittees. And one that I would like to see us have is a committee to look at the piece about Dutra Street that we were given last week and pursue some observation, some sort of acknowledgement of what went on in Dutra Street, which you were part of. So,
We got pictures of Gucci, all the old houses that were there. Got pictures of it. I mean, that'd be nice to hang some.
thank you.
And
You said there is
The-
a public comment.
there is an attendee on Zoom with their hand up. You're welcome to begin speaking. If you'd like to state your name, you're welcome to.
Yes, thank you. My name is Philip Laverty of Carmel Valley. Thank you, Chairman Thomas and Commissioners. Thank you as well, Mr. Edwards. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. Enjoyed meeting you at the last meeting. I wanted to thank you for taking up Karen Brown's report on the history of Dutra Street. I should note I'm an anthropologist who's worked with the Ohlone, Costanoan, Esalen Nation and other Esalen and Southern Ohlone or Rumsen people since, before 1996. I met Rudy in 1996 when I began my graduate studies at the University of New Mexico. The narrative about Dutra Street was one of the first that I collected, and it's always had a profound significance in my eyes in the history of Esalen people. I earned my doctoral degree in 2010 from the University of New Mexico. I taught for some time at CSUMB. I currently work for the Department of Defense, and again, I'm a resident of Carmel Valley. I wanted to thank Karen Brown for putting together the report. She really did flesh out in documentary detail the injustice that did occur with the dispossession of the Dutra Street neighborhood due to eminent domain. So she really advanced our understanding of that. It really is a significant history. It's remarkable that a multifamily residential community continued to persist in downtown Monterey up until the 1950s, given the tremendous history of dispossession that Native people faced here following the secularization of the missions. Well, of course, during the mission period itself. So it's remarkable that that community existed. This played a critical role in the federal acknowledgement petition of the Ohlone Costanoan Esalen Nation to the Bureau of Indian Affairs because it amounted to a face-to-face community in a small neighborhood. It was also pivotal that it was removed from those residents through eminent domain. This undermined their ability to continue as a close-knit community, though continue to remain closely in touch. It was also noted in the documents of special Indian agents who were tasked with identifying Native communities in California by Congress. The Monterey Band, with a population of 50, shows up on Special Agent C. Kelsey's maps of 1910 and 1913. And this roughly aligns and I think represents the Dutra Street community. At any rate, I just wanted to thank you again for taking up this important history and doing what you can do to recognize it and acknowledge the injustice and interpret that history. So thank you all very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Other public comment? No. None heard. We can move to the informational reports and staff comments, I believe. You.
On my microphone back on. Just received update on the Path of History project. And so to start off with, we have folks that may recall, we have our expanded Path of History. And I had provided a list of sites that were on the current Path of History and on the two expanded paths to Commissioners Thomas, Commissioners Evans, and Commissioner Wachowski, and ask for any feedback because I'll be going back to council possibly on October 23rd on a work session to discuss the Path of History, to do a presentation on that. A couple things that we discussed at that meeting were doing digital content first, rather than any kind of placards or anything inside the ground. Like we have the markers right now. We don't have any funding associated with that right now. So the quickest way to do that would be through our digital app and go through and add content that way. And then also add new brochures. So to create the new brochures for the city, which was right now we have the Explore Monterey, which has not changed since pre-pandemic. So a lot of those had outdated information on the brochures. The folding map that came out that said like the Dali Museum, for example, or Monterey Museum of Art, they would have the wrong hours and information on those things. And then also about adding community kiosks. And this would be similar to ones in style theoretically as like what Old Monterey Foundation added in partnership with the city of Monterey at the Lower Presidio Historic Park. And so there would be informational panels with maps to the Path of History and different historic resources in here. So a couple of things that I reached out, and one thing I will say is that Rudy, I'm going to email you also because I had reached out to all the,
Wait till that goes by.
wait for the jets have been going all the way. The Albion, which was our consultant that worked on this expanded Path of History, had connected with the different tribes in the region about the expanded Path of History. And after our last call, that was 2 months ago, I reached out to all the different tribal contacts that we have there. We work through officially through planning department. And I've gotten one response. I'm waiting for scheduling that meeting, but I'll also, Rudy, I'll reach out to you too about setting up a meeting because it was providing feedback on the sites. Because one of the things that we talked about was coming up with thematic elements for Indigenous representation here in Monterey as well. So how do we represent that, what areas were important to the tribes that they're still they still exist today here in the region as well. So how do we represent them having those things? So I'd like to have more kind of conversations before going forward, because I do think there are the list of sites, the map is not set in stone right now either. So this is the kind of thing where if we are looking at Dutra Street was narrated by Steinbeck as part of Tortilla Flats. You know, when they talk about, there's some people that look as Tortilla Flats as Carmel Valley, you know, and Susan Gregory lived on Johnson Street, you know, so there's all these different places around here, but that was one that he clearly talked about as well. So if we want to talk about things like there, I think it's important for us to look at this in that expanded path of history as well. How do we want to do things there? So keep that in mind for the commissioners that want to provide updates. But I sent an Excel list to the commissioners with asking to get feedback by October 18th. And then the thought is once we start getting a list together is to send out a letter to all the property owners based on who actually owns the property, about basically like, hey, we want to highlight your property on Path of History, just so that people know that people are going to walk past and look at their property about that. And October 23rd is, as I mentioned, is the tentative date to talk about the Path of History, just the history of it from being a driving path to a walking path through the process of the new one. Then we'll add, once we get the list, I think the first step is adding the content to the Story app, which is our mobile app that has all the new content on there. And as I mentioned before, this fiscal year, we're planning on updating the Explore Monterey brochures and the physical, we can look at the physical kiosk. So with that, any questions or feedback?
Mr. Sauber?
Yes, I can't take the call right now.
Is that city council meeting on the 23rd? Is that a study session?
I believe it's a study session, yeah.
I can't take a call now. Excuse me.
Oh, it's for your safe box drill. I just wanted to tell you the time the box is coming. Should I tell you that?
Yes, after
Unfortunately, I have-
5:30.
Okay, we're getting ready to leave, but he'll be here Monday at 2:30, okay?
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Brian, would you mind sending, I was on vacation for a while, so
Yeah.
I may not have seen that Excel list. Would you mind sending it again to me?
I will do that, yeah.
Thank you very much. And you want responses by the 18th?
If I can, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think what it was on there is that I sent a list and it was anything, also any description. So I have a brief description that was done. I ran the descriptions, myself and Dennis looked through them as part of the Page and Turnbull report, and other people from the commission gave feedback prior. But if there's other things, they're very brief descriptions right now. We don't have a very lengthy kind of information, but I'll send that out.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd like one too.
Any other comments or questions? Any other comments or questions?
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay.
And you'll send, whatever report you send to the city council on the 23rd, could you copy the commission?
Yeah,
And then, I think it would be helpful that at least one or more members of the subcommittee attend that meeting.
I'll give you guys a heads up once it's verified that we're holding the meeting that day, nothing
Yeah.
changes, I'll definitely send you guys.
Already. Thank you.
I'd like to appoint some subcommittees and discuss additional possible.
We're gonna wait
subcommittees.
for Francesca, our recording, and come back.
Where'd she go?
She's helping Bob on the little elevator.
Uh-huh. It was good to have Commissioner Evans back with us. He, of course, tried to Zoom whenever he could, but there were some difficulties doing that. Apparently.
Oh, you're welcome. Chris is the go-to guy, so Chris, he's Chris is the one that did the install of the tiles along Cannery Road too. So.
Thank you. Fantastic. I'd like to appoint at least one subcommittee and discuss some additional subcommittees, which were obvious to me anyway, during the presentations today, things we need. First of all, the idea of a small subcommittee to review our status of, have we been able to build our program back up to the point of pre-COVID? I have a feeling we have not. We have some strong handicaps in doing that in the terms of personnel and funds. But I think we can make more use of the commission's efforts. And I'd like to appoint what's going to be 3 people, but one is not here today. But I'd like to appoint as one of the longest serving members, Bill Kowski as chair, and one of the newer members, Commissioner Kimsey, to that. And I'd like to have that report by our December meeting. Some years, because December meeting was at a different position in the month than it is now, we didn't have a December meeting. This year, since it's very early in the month, I'd like to make sure that we have that meeting, partially because there's a problem in the January meeting is that both the chair and the vice chair will be absent from the country. So I think we need to move forward with meetings both November and December as scheduled, if at all possible. Hopefully with a full complement of the commission at those meetings. So a status committee to report in December on where are we from both pre and post COVID. I think we've heard a need for additional subcommittees today. And next time I'd like to appoint committees, one to work with the Museum of Art. They want general feelings about what is needed, and I think we have a perspective to do that. And I would like to take volunteers from
I would like to
commission.
be on that if possible. In fact, just as we're meeting, I got an invitation from Roxanne to be on one of the focus groups with the Museum of Art.
There may be others. Another is, the indigenous peoples question, the Dutra. Some recognition of the Dutra Street community, I think, is an excellent idea. But I'd like to have a subcommittee, again, with a short reporting period, take that on and come up with a recommendation for us. Okay. Thank you.
Mike, can I just suggest, I know there's been a lot of, and Rudy knows this very well. Could you expand that to see not only Dutra, but other possible sites? I know one site is the Lower Presidio, where of course the indigenous people were heavily involved. So maybe to look at, two sites or at least those two, I would think. Tim may have others.
We already have signage on the lower Presidio part.
Yeah, but I was thinking of even something more to meet with Rudy and other people and see if I know they have once a year, they have a meeting, the indigenous people meet on the site. And I know I've talked to them and they would like sort of an area, I don't know what direction that is. As you're facing the museum to the left, I guess that's south of the museum, some area set aside. So I just wondered if the subcommittee could explore that. I know there are one or two signs there, but they're not as visible as if you go by the museum. If some people come only to the museum, and so they don't recognize that aspect.
There's been discussion of a kiosk,
Yes.
some like structure that would help that. But I'd like to get the Dutra Street done first. Now,
Usually covers a lot of, because it covers ancient time and modern.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
yes, with the coverage and then Steinbeck period.
But Tim would be an excellent person on that subcommittee. I know with his background, and of course he's not here, but you might ask him off agenda. I wonder if John O'Neill would be interested in that. He's so involved with various historic aspects.
But I'd like to get some volunteers from people who aren't here. If possible.
Chair, what is your expectation from people on these reports and what is your expectation from staff involvement in this? Because these are pretty broad topics. I would imagine there's a lot of research in terms of the Public Records Act requests that came in and the research done by Philip Laverty on Dutra Street, the discussions, the interviews. There's a lot of topic out there. So just what is Dutra Street or what is, I think there needs to be more clarity in terms of what are your expectations are in that. And also on pre-COVID, post-COVID for programs, is this what was staff doing? Is this what the commissions were doing? What is exactly you need other? Because I mentioned this because there was a lot of staff work in terms of doing research on Dutra Street. And I'm potentially talking about this on October 23rd as well as Path of History, because I think this is something that ties into both. I think there's a connection there between if we're talking about history and markers and different things out there, we don't have, the city itself does not set aside money for budget for markers for the museums department to install plaques or anything like that. So typically they're, grants, donations, NCIP, those kind of things on there. So if we were doing something tied into it together and putting in a marker, we could do that with the grant. But I need to know kind of clarification on what this is, as well as Museum of Art, because I think appointing a subcommittee to work with the Museum of Art that has a specific process and they're working with their consultant, I think it's assigning somebody, if the museums commissioners, who is going to be the ones that will actually work with the Museum of Art's process, or asking them to come back. We need to have more guidance in terms of what do we want to do with them. So all of these need, I think, more clarity in terms of what do we want out of these subcommittees.
I believe that that's one of the first steps that the subcommittee would take.
I'm just saying it's going to be a big lift. It's a big ask because things are happening with Dutra Street that's going back to city documents from, I believe 1956, 1958. There's a lot of work that has to be done in there. So figuring out how to do it.
I think we have a public comment.
Well, when it comes to Dutra Street, you can't involve all the Indians in Monterey County. You just.
Rudy, you have to go to the microphone so we can get, if you don't mind.
When you're dealing with Dutra Street, You have to deal with just the immediate Indian families that were there. I mean, you can't bring in other tribal people who know nothing about Ducha Street. You need the families that were there. And there were 7, 8, 9 families, and there were 2 Japanese families. There was Dakotas and the Nakamuras. They lived there too on Ducha Street. But, you know, it's the idea where nobody knows what went on in Ducha Street except the people who lived there. You know, sure, the other Indians that you guys want to bring in, I mean, they know about Monterey. They know about sacred sites. I think they do, but not most of them do. I mean, like the city of Monterey is one of our very sacred sites. I did 3 reburials in the city of Monterey. I did 4 reburials on the bike path down on the beach. And I did 2 reburials on Ducha Street. One of them was my uncle. PG&E found the human remains when they were putting in the telephone pole. And he was buried in the gully. You know, so, you know, we uncovered him and we buried him across the gully, you know, where it would never be touched again. You know, so what I'm saying, I don't mind bringing in all these other Indians as far as art, you know, as far as sacred sites and things like that go. But when it comes to Ducha Street, I really do think that you should just keep it to the families that were born and raised there and brought up there. And I would love to work on this subcommittee, whatever it is, you know, because I know every Indian that should be here, and I know every Indian that shouldn't. That's like the term, I'm going to give you guys a little short history here. The term Ohlone. There's no such animal as an Ohlone Indian. There was a tribe in Santa Cruz. It was called the Acalón tribe. Acalón. Somebody came in there and said, okay, we're going to call all the Indians from San Francisco and down to Santa Barbara Ohlonies. And this is back in 1965. And so they did. And I've never heard the term Ohlone till I was like about 32 years old. And I said, where's this coming from? You know, so, you know, you got to watch out for people. I mean, you know, and then people get mad at me because I ask for birth certificates and genealogy charts. I got a genealogy chart as big as that screen right there. And it shows my whole family. And I'm proud of it. You know, and people say it's pedigree. Well, it may be pedigree, but I'm proud of it. You know. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse. But does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, I thought sure Bill would. What committee are you and I working on?
I'm sorry, say again, Rudy?
What committee are you and I working on?
Well, we're with the Old Monterey Foundation, and I know one of the items we were discussing is to have Indigenous people give an historic talk at one of our lectures at the McCone Center.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we're dealing with that right now, and I think it's a great idea. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, think about volunteer for next time, please. I guess we're up to commissioner comments.
I have none.
None. Commissioner comments, Commissioner Kinsey.
Well, the other, at the city council meeting, I did speak about the Lord Presidio and hope that the commission would be involved. I'm glad to see Brian said, I think that was pretty much accepted, that we would be a part of that discussion. Share the information that we've had in the past, to work with them. Very done. So I hope that continues. It's a hard way to do that.
Is that, sorry, do you have any other comments?
You know what? Thank you. That's what I was hoping you would say.
Commissioner Evans is left at this point. So, next meeting is, what's the date?
First Thursday in November.
Yes. But what's the date? Sorry.
That would be November 7th.
That late.
This is the last.
Yes, November 7th. Four PM. See you all then,
Already.
and hopefully some other. Adjourn.